You know what an object is in JavaScript? We've been dealing with them whether we knew it or not. How do I make a new object? Curly braces, yeah. And they are key property pairs, right? Key value pairs. So kind of like a hash in Ruby, or what do they call in Python? Dictionaries, right. Yeah. An associative array in PHP. Same idea. Keys and values. So for example, const foods equals an object. And let's say proteins eggs, bacon, comma, veggies. Maybe I throw veggies in there. Or maybe I don't. Maybe I do that later. Foods, what's for lunch today, Peter? Subway? Lunch? Subway. So, key value. The value can be anything. It could be an array. It could be a string. It could be a number. It could be another object. Doesn't matter. The keys are strings. And if you follow certain naming rules, you don't have to put quotes around them. But you always could. You always could put quotes around them. And if you do put quotes around them, they could be truly any string at all, with spaces and everything. Generally, we avoid doing that if we can. So if you do feel the need to put multiple words, we generally use camel case. Because if we do that, we don't need the quotes, and that just looks much nicer. But there's another advantage to that, too. How do you get things out of an object? If I want to put Subway, what do I put? How do I get Subway out of there? Foods dot lunch, right? Retrieving. Oh, accessing a property. So these are all called properties, which is a word I've thrown around casually. Those are properties. There's another way. Anybody know the other way besides a dot? Use a square bracket and then actually put a string literal in there, or a string variable, doesn't matter. So I could do something like console log foods square bracket. The string lunch also works. Difference, you can't use the dot if you don't follow those naming rules, right? So if I have a string like Matt, what's cooking? What's for lunch? Okay. No, there's nothing close to here, unfortunately. Matt's lunch. There you go. So Matt's lunch is McDonald's. We're using our escape there a lot. Everybody know how to do that? How to escape a character inside a string? Same as a lot of other languages. So I could have, of course, just used double quotes for those strings, and then I wouldn't have had to escape them. Also fine. So if I did that, then I would have to say Matt's lunch, because that key didn't follow the rules, right? So if you follow basically variable name rules, then you can always leave off the quotes, and you can use the dot syntax. Any other kind of string, and you have to both use the quotes when defining it, or and use the square brackets when accessing it. But that also goes for if you have the property name in a variable, for example. So, for example, I have const category. I'll make it let. Why not? Let category equals proteins. Then I could also say console.log foods square bracket proteins. And if I did that right, proteins, right? Proteins. Category, dummy. So now it's looking for a variable called proteins, right? Because I didn't put the quotes around it. I meant category. There you go. Got my proteins. How about adding something to an object after the fact? Yep. Just do any of those same things. You can assign them. You can assign to a property. So I could say foods dot veggies equals veggies. Or to make the point that the variable name doesn't have to match. Vegetables. Totally works. To change an existing property, same thing. Just use the equal sign. But you can totally add it to it. Just because it wasn't there in the beginning doesn't mean you can't just use an assignment operator to add it later. Totally works. Make sense so far? So object properties could be numbers, they could be arrays, they could be other objects, they could be strings, they can be whatever. Could they be functions? Could I say foods dot eat equals function console log nom nom nom. That really do a thing. Foods dot eat open close parens nom 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 nom. That's right. Totally works. What do we call a function when it happens to be a property of an object? Anybody know? A method. Yes, there's a special name for that. Methods. Methods are functions that happen to be properties of an object. So method are functions that you get to by using the dot. That is what makes a function a method. All good stuff to know. Questions? Yeah.
Keys, what do you call them in JavaScript?
Keys?
Keys,
Mm-hmm.
Do they have to be immutable? Can they be like any immutable object?
They have to be strings.
Like, so it has either a string or...
It has to be a string. It has to be a string, yeah. Okay. So even when you don't use the quotes, they're still strings. It's just a syntactical thing. You can leave them off. But yeah, they have to be strings. Now, if you try to use something else, it may automatically call toString on that. That's kind of an interesting question. Let's see. Let's see if that works. So if I try to say, so what's veggies? Veggies is an array, right? So if I try to say foods square bracket veggies equals what? And let's see what foods looks like now. Object eat is a function. Lunch, mat, proteins. So tomato, zucchini, asparagus is the key. So if you try to use something other than a string, everything in JavaScript, every object in JavaScript has a built-in method called toString. And there are a lot of circumstances under which it will just call that automatically. If you try to use a non-string as a string, in many cases, it'll just automatically call toString on it. And what that is varies. So for an array, yeah, it's actually like the items of the array separated by a comma. For other kinds of objects, like let's say I make non-string keys will automatically be converted to strings with toString. So let's make another one. Const. Heck, I don't know. Stuff I like. Stuff we like. Looks better. And that's an object. And I say stuff we like, square bracket, foods, equals, what now? Let's see. Console log, stuff we like. So the key is the string object. Because when you call .toString on an object, that's what it is. It's just going to be the string, square bracket, object, square bracket. Trying to use an object as a key. Property name, key, you can use those terms interchangeably. Did everybody do the Code Wars problems? How'd you do? Do you remember the mirror object one? Yeah, that's the hardest one. The point is to get you to try to learn a little something about objects. Did you find a way to get a list of all of the keys in an object to solve that one? How'd you do it? Do you remember? Do you remember what Google told you?
No.
It's fine to Google stuff. It's cool if you remember them afterward, but that's okay. Yeah, Sam?
I think it was like an array has a reverse method, or maybe it's a string has a reverse method. I don't know. There's just some reverse method.
Yeah, but I mean, so not that part of the mirror object task, but how you get the list of keys or the list of properties from an object. You could do it for each loop. That works too. Yeah. There is like a .keys thing. It is not quite as simple as food.keys. That would be great.
I think that's what I ended up using as some variation, but it was bigger.
Yeah. In JavaScript, there's object.keys, and you pass in the object. So if I like console log that thing, then I get an array of all the keys. Get an array of all the keys in an object. Or the property names, keys, property names, whatever, same thing. And that can be pretty handy, too. Yeah, how do we loop over these things? So we can use good old for loops. All right, for. Now here's a case where we'd have to use let, not const. Let I equal 0. I less than veggies.length. There's a length property. I++. Console log veggies, square bracket, I. Totally works. But man, that's a really long way to say do the same thing to everything in an array. We can go a lot shorter. I heard for each. Who used for each? Anybody else use for each? So veggies dot for each. How's that work? Let's look it up. Array prototype for each. Executes a provided function once for each array element. So the syntax, the first argument is a callback. We'll be dealing with callbacks quite a bit. It's nice to actually know how they work. or what the word means.